on modern strategic data thinking and objectively specifying what it means to be data literate. International recognition has resulted in an intensive schedule of events worldwide. Peter also hosts the longest running data management webinar series hosted by Dataversity, this one right here. Starting before Google, before data was big, and before data science, Peter has founded several companies that have helped more than 200 organizations leverage data-specific savings and have been measured at more than $1.5 billion. His latest venture is Anything Awesome LLC. And with that, I will hand the floor over to Peter to get today's webinar started.
I hope we get the rest of it right. Well, again,
Yeah.
good to see everybody today. Mark, thank you so much. And Ashley, you set us up perfectly for this, and I can't wait till we get back to the top of the hour so we can continue to talk about this. But what Ashley was describing there for you all was a conversation style, and that's what we're going to get into as well here. So you can see I have a little theme going here, conquering data debt in the age of AI. We're going to do an AI reality check for starters on this. Then we're going to dive into some very specifics about how stewards can interact with AI to help them better, particularly people that are just getting started. And the nice news, as Ashley was saying, is that conversation can be a very productive one. Then we'll look at some specific practical uses around this and then finish up with Q&A starting again at the top of the hour here. We'll welcome Ashley back in and you guys can try to play Stump Us on that particular piece. I almost called us chumps, Ashley. Sorry, I didn't mean to include you in that, but let's go ahead and dive in here. So first question is, if I could, wish I could see you guys, has anybody actually seen a data steward productively employed as part of an AI design exercise? And I would guess that the answer to that is probably not, which is unfortunate. And I hope to change your thinking about that and help give you enough information so that you can, if they won't let you in the meetings, you can at least request to get added or barge your way in. Those of you that know me, I'm a person that asks for forgiveness rather than permission as far as that goes. But I also want to tell you, some of the young people that are here are extraordinarily good at what they're doing. And it's such a joy to be in my classes working with these really, really bright students who are teaching me stuff, as well as hopefully I'm teaching them some stuff too as well. Let's get started with a very famous MIT report that many people have seen this headline, but probably most of you have not actually read the report. It's a very good report, but the real key to it is that they're finding that with much of the things around data, we are still focusing at the wrong level of abstraction here. So just as data science has become basically not as productive, and it takes people 3 years to become productive as a data scientist, but if you become an actuarial data scientist, you can get that productivity much quicker. If you become a manufacturing data scientist, if you become a Medicare data scientist, I know several of them, and they've been around for decades. It's not got anything specific to do with this. I mentioned that most people haven't actually read the report, though, because it's a very detailed and internal report. That said, though, there's several confirming pieces here as well, which is that 95% of the pilot projects in enterprises do not deliver significant financial impact or revenue increases, that they have real challenge integrating these AI concepts into existing business workflows, and that there is a verification tax where employees are spending very significant amounts of time verifying the AI outputs, which kind of negates the efficiency gains all the way around to it. And successful projects are focusing not in customer-facing areas, but in back-office-facing areas. The report went on to say what differentiates these successful products, the workflow integration here. Again, understanding how the workflow is so that you can use AI to properly augment that process to have that conversation. Domain specificity tools. The idea is not to go out and build your own, grab stuff that already exists, to look at externally sourced systems. Again, much better rate of success than internal systems that are there around all of that. And this gets us to what I think are the minimum viable requirements in a stewardship context. You're going to use the tools to narrowly focus on providing better back office workflows. You're going to hopefully communicate with a common vocabulary. It's really hard to do it otherwise. And make sure that you, of course, have data that's fit for purpose, supporting an infrastructure that ensures that the solution enhances the existing performance. explainable auditability, and finally, a verified CRUD matrix encompassing the data challenge space. We'll talk about each of those. Right now, at first, AI to work at scale has to be focused on a few number of existing workflows. It's got to complement your existing architectures, and it's got to specifically focus on several literacies that will very gently approach in here as well. The next thing I'm going to show you is one of the most valuable things I've learned about AI. And of course, it's presented with a wonderful tongue-in-cheek piece. This is a data scientist I follow named Hannah Fry, who does a great job. This little 2-minute thing I'm going to show you here is called Why You Should Be Polite to AI, but that's not what she's trying to talk about. That's how she hooks you to get you into here. Watch how she articulates.
There is actually a really good reason why you should say please and thank you to your chatbots. And it's not just so that AI will spare you when the apocalypse comes. Okay, I'm sure you've seen all sorts of posts telling you what prompt to use to get the most out of your language model. I think you can pretty much forget all of that because there's only really one important thing to remember, which is that the AI that we have now is really, really, really good at role playing. So you shouldn't talk to it like it's a Google search or like you're trying to extract information from it as though it's Wikipedia. Instead, you should talk to it as though it's an improvisational actor that can be any character imaginable. And the reason for this is that large language models, they don't store facts like it's a database, right? They generate responses dynamically based on having read everything that humans have ever written and the prompt that you give it. And that means that AI, the stuff we have now, it doesn't have this stable identity, right? It doesn't have a fixed worldview, it doesn't have personal beliefs. And so if you prompt it in a particular way, it will respond in kind. If you try and prompt it as though it's a Shakespearean bard, then it will give you a flowery response. If you try and prompt it as though it is an extremely effective and smart scientist, it will give you the relevant response. But if you prompt it as though it's an encyclopedia, it's going to try and sound like one, but it's still just performing a role, and you've effectively just restricted what it can do. So instead, what you should do is you should imagine that you're a film director, right? And that you have a character in mind, and then you should prompt your AI accordingly. So don't say, give me 3 interesting facts about science. Say, you are a world-renowned scientist with PhDs in biology and chemistry and physics, and your nephew says that science is boring. You only have a few minutes and you've got to give him counterexamples. What extraordinary stories do you use? And here is the big idea, right? If you are working with a character and you want that character to eagerly help you, whoever they are, it's probably better to be polite.
Like I said, she sort of buries the lead in there on that. But the idea of role playing is actually quite powerful in how we want stewards to be utilizing AI. So now I'm going to go quickly through a little bit of my technology stack. I tend to be Gemini centric because I do a lot with YouTube videos on here. And this is a look on my screen, and you'll see a couple of things here. There's my stuff, which is older stuff that I've been working with, so I can go back and find it. So it's got a little bit of a memory. And I created something called a gem. Now, a gem in Gemini, it's probably not the best name for it, but it is quite useful. You can set up a personality as Hannah just described. I want somebody in this case to be a data steward mentor. You're a veteran data steward. I'm not sure there it is. Understand the differences between private and public sector pieces. Again, you can put whatever you want into the instructions. This one is set up to be a mentor. So a lot of the advice you'll see that I'm giving you in this particular program gives you a lot of ideas around mentoring. And I did this, created the mentor persona for data steward, and I asked it a 3-word question after that. The question that I asked it was, why, 4 words, why data governance manufacturing? Okay. And it comes back and says, well, hey, there's a bunch of things that are going on in manufacturing that you should pay attention to, and does a very, very good job. Now, I rate AI overall at 85%. It's a B student, a solid B student. So if you're okay to get a solid B student, copy what AI says and paste it, and you'll get in a mild amount of trouble on this. Again, the way that Ashley was describing it earlier, it's better to have a conversation with it so that you come to a good conclusion rather than letting the AI come to a conclusion. Now, there's one other piece in the Google stack that I use quite a bit too, and that's something called Notebook LM. So most of you figured out, oops, it's interesting what that was. Most of you have figured out that I'm a university professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. We bumped our way up into the final four last month, but as usual, washed out pretty early around that. And as a faculty member, I'm responsible for understanding 162 specific policies. And I can assure you that after this webinar, I'll go back to my studious life of studying all of these policies so that no, I'm just kidding. Nobody looks at these things. I hope my university's not listening to me on this. But let's see what we can do with them. So I took those 162 policies and I added them to something called Notebook LM. So these are all 162 policies at VCU. It immediately gives me a summary of all sorts of things around that. And I'm going to talk about things that appear over here on the right called the studio. But first, I'm going to play a little bit.
All right, let's be real for a sec.
Okay.
Nobody, and I mean nobody,
Mm-hmm.
actually looks forward to spending their precious weekend
Right.
buried in a stack of university policies,
Nice.
like trying to find like a really exciting,
Yeah.
thriller novel in the library rule book section, right? Who does that?
Nobody.
But that's why we're here.
That's right.
We're your trusty guides for this stuff.
Yeah.
We're going to take you on a deep dive into these VCU policies.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to.
We got you.
We're going to be
So what you're seeing there is I clicked just audio and it made a nice little podcast. I'm not sure whether they can use the word podcast or not on this, but it's really important that you think about this from a couple of perspectives. And there's lots of other things here in the studio for you to play with. You'll see some of them. I used the infographic component to create some very detailed slides for you. I've also created some specific slides and done some other things around here, including the little video pieces. So again, it's a wonderful set of facilities to take and utilize here. But the most important thing on this is that people learn by watching, by doing, and by listening. And this opens up the listening angle because many, many people who you can't get 10 minutes with will listen to a podcast because they're driving in their car or walking the dog or something else that they do around this. And I'm urging you all as data stewards to start thinking about that as an avenue for communicating with them. In the past, it's always been, I've got to brief them, there's a PowerPoint, blah, blah, blah. But if you can throw that stuff into a audio piece, there are people who learn better that way. So it's a really nice opportunity to be able to have some of that information in here. Here's another slide that talks about this. Again, how can data stewards use AI to learn about their roles, right? Well, again, here's 4 ideas. There are a lot of these slides. Please don't try and read them now. I've got them all for you. Mark will send them to you at the end of the presentation period and all this sort of thing. So these are for referencing later on, but you can see accelerating foundational best practices, refining through AI-based maturity assessments, bridging the gap between business and IT, and enhancing skills for emerging data roles are just some of the things that the AI suggests. And I find these suggestions to be quite good. Let's talk specifically about a little bit of quality at this point. Definitions, and I think Ashley said it before, fit for purpose. Martin Epler's very famous definition on that, which means that data quality management is a process that you have to use in order to make sure that things go well and work in that fashion. I tell a little story about Popeye and spinach on this. If haven't heard the story before, it goes like this. Back in a long time ago. I forget how it was. I think it was 18 something or other. I'll have to go back and read the story. You can see there's a link to it at the bottom of the screen here for you. But somebody was measuring the amount of minerals and iron in spinach, in various vegetables, and they made an error. They measured 3.5 milligrams of iron, but it was recorded as 35 milligrams of iron. And that story went on to cause spinach sales to go up in the United States of America because everybody wanted to be like Popeye. It was not corrected until 50 years after the publication of this. Absolutely amazing story around that. If you are a steward and you need a little bit of why people should do it, people even today still think that leafy green vegetables are good, but spinach is better than the best leafy green vegetable. It's not. It's as good as any leafy green vegetable. Well, this leads us to my favorite aspect of quality, which is the princess on the pea story. You'll see the pea down here at the bottom of this stack of mattresses. And the princess, of course, up here is sleepless. That's because data errors that go into things oftentimes will stick around in a structural fashion for a lot longer than you expect them to do. For example, you can Google it and find out what are the errors in the various Oracle manuals. And you will find them out there because Oracle doesn't go about and correct errors in their own manual. So they depend on their user community to do all that sort of work for them, which is a great deal if you can get it. We also have to understand the literacy here as well. It's the idea that right now, these pieces go in if you have a bad set of data structures. They lock in the imperfections of those data structures for the life of the application, restricting future benefits and decreasing organizational average, accounting for 20 to 40% of your IT budget. That is a target of money that you can go after, help to save. That's how I got to my $1.5 billion, and really end up with everybody feeling much better about the process. There's a manufacturing rule that is very similar to this. Again, if you aren't in manufacturing, you've probably never heard of 110, 100, but I guarantee you that every CEO in a manufacturing organization understands it. It's $1 to fix something at the source. It's $10 to fix it if it doesn't get fixed until it's in the warehouse, and now you're using more expensive resources to fix the complement. And if it gets out of the warehouse, you end up with business losses at the 100. So this is where everybody gets the 110, 100 pieces from. It's a really good piece. And like I said, if you're particularly in manufacturing, everybody in manufacturing understands this particular piece. There are 4 dimensions of quality. We're not doing a full quality piece here, but it is important to understand that we want data to be fit for purpose, but it can only be fit for purpose if it measures up on all 4 dimensions. There are value dimensions, representation dimensions. These are what we call practice-related quality challenges. And then there are structure-related quality challenges that come into play here as well. I'll give you an example of each. These are not my knees, but if they were, and I was having knee surgery the next day, as the keyboardist in our band did, he had a complete knee surgery replacement. And I asked him, did they come in the night before and write this one? Yes, right knee, day of surgery, right? Again, they literally, the surgeon will walk into your room the night before and write this on your knee so that when they have you all under anesthesia the next day and you can't really talk to them, it was the right knee or the left knee, right? Again, you don't have those kind of things. These are practice-related data quality pieces. However, here's another one. This one happens quite a bit. You can't even see the whole title here until you see the whole picture. But we might start out with who is Joan. Joan might have come in as a prospect, as J.E. Smith, because it came from a Microsoft browser, and Microsoft likes to throw your initials into things rather than actually names on there. So they've got one there, and they've got another prospect over here is Joni Smith, but the call center engineer that day had a little bit of wax in their ear, and they couldn't really hear everything that was going on. Then you get it from a third-party mailing list, Joan E. Smith or John E. Smith on there. And then there's a customer database that's in there as well. You can see what we're really trying to figure out is who is Joan Smith. And all of these things together add up to structural related data quality challenges. If we don't fix both of these, we will not have the ability to make our AIs work correctly. And the main reason for that is because too many organizations simply think their task is done with respect to data when they hand good quality data to employees. But the problem is employees have not been as data literate as we would like them to be. For example, and this is really good research coming out of something called the dataliteracyproject.org down here in the right-hand corner. It's a joint venture between Click and Accenture who've done some really good work. They asked thousands of people around the world and said, gosh, when faced with a decision that incorporates data, half of the people will defer to their gut and the other half will actually incorporate data. So why are we handing them data? It's a useless exercise. What's worse still is that if you go up the food chain, it turns out to be 2/3 of executives don't understand how to do this. And when asked to incorporate skills into this, 50% of them can do it, but 36% of them find an alternate way of doing this. I'm not sure what the alternate way would be, but 14% of them avoid the task entirely. This is a tremendous source of untapped potential in your organizations that your stewards can take the lead on. One more set of stats from these long studies. This is a different one. This is one from Randy Bean, who works with Tom Davenport, and has asked this question starting since 2018. Are your problems with data primarily technology oriented, or are they primarily people and process oriented? You can see it's a very clear 80-20 split. 2019, those are the results. 2020, those are the results. 2021, those are the results. 2022, 23, 24, 25. Are you getting the picture here? Yes. In fact, 2026 was the highest we've ever received, that number. So I'll say minimally 80% of the challenges with data are people and process based. Whom in your organization is equipped to do these types of problems? It is your data steward community in here. It's the only resource that we have that even pretends to address these challenges, and that people do represent the biggest impediment to any type of data success, of course, including AI successes here as well. Couple more things on data, and then we'll dive into some very detailed specifics on it. One of them is companies are running out of data. I know that sounds crazy. How can we actually be doing this? Well, it turns out there's about 25% less data available out there than there was in 2022 when we started this particular AI journey. And that's a problem. That means that several organizations, many, have started walling off their data so that it can't be hoovered up by the bots that go around and do it. And some people are putting data out there that's actually designed to poison AI. So this is Project Nightshade from the University of Chicago, a really nice way of protecting intellectual property and making sure that it doesn't get hoovered up by the AIs. And these things cost a non-trivial amount as well in here. Many CIOs are going, oh, I'm not sure I can afford to spend that much money on it. What's resulted then is a tremendous amount of data debt. Again, data debt slows progress, decreases quality, increases costs, and presents greater risks. And 80% of the data in your organization is rot. It's data that is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And that is something that you're going to have to face. Again, imagine wading into this particular house here and trying to figure out what is there that is good and what is there that is bad. If only data were as easy to parse as a bunch of old magazines in there. Just a thing, as I was preparing this particular one, Gemini came along and said, hey, data debt's a really powerful metaphor on this, which I thought was very nice. I didn't ask for that particular one. It suggested it to me all by itself in order to do that. I've had to do all sorts of things. It's getting to know me pretty well these days on here. And again, here's more examples of data debt, no entry in the glossary, so it doesn't have a standard definition. There's a new undocumented table. Oh my goodness, how did that get through our checks? Here we've got a lack of validation rules, poor integration, and insufficient data security measures. So these are just some of the ways in which this can help. But the key is you have to address data debt proactively. It's the time and effort it's going to take to return your shared data to a governed state from your likely state that's there. It's called getting back to zero. If you clean up the data debt, you haven't done anything good with your data, but you still got to do that before you can fix the rest. Again, you're going to undo some stuff before you can actually go forward. Anybody want to take a guess what is the #1 complaint of CEOs worldwide? That is correct. It is the size of your cloud bill. Cloud spending is infuriating people. And the fact that it's on CEOs' minds means it's escaped the relatively safe confines it used to have of a CIO or a CDO or a chief technology officer or something like that in here. Again, the true cost of cloud is enormous. Here's an individual posted on Reddit just a couple of days back. We're moving to the cloud and we're already spending $500K a month. I can't help wondering what $6 million a year would actually buy us in on-prem services. And that is a very reasonable question. Okay, so now for your stewards out there, let's dive into some specifics. This section each starts with a very big infographic. Again, you'll get these infographics, so that you get a picture of it, and then I'll shrink it down over there and say, look, when you're trying to complement existing developmental opportunities, it's important that you understand what your existing architecture is. If you don't have it listed in there, if you don't have it understood, again, we said that architecture cannot be helpful if it is not known. Now, if it's in somebody's head, that's good, but if it's written down on paper, it's even better still. So the idea here is stewards should be very familiar with parts of the architecture that pertain to their governance realm, the amount of governing that they're doing, the focus of their governance efforts in here. Again, whether you're fighting data debt or anything else, lots and lots of good information out there that you can go by simply doing and getting a hold of your metadata. Now, some of you are familiar with the process of reading a database catalog. It's actually quite easy to do. If you haven't got that particular type of capability, you can ask AI and it will actually show you how to do it because it read one of my early books on that particular topic. So this is the first piece, is to complement your existing architectural development opportunities. That means when you are buying a new software package or engaging with somebody who's going to provide you with software as a service via the web, it is critical that you obtain from them a logical model of what their data is going to look like so that you can determine whether your existing data models will complement or conflict with the one that's out there in the cloud or wherever it is, whatever package you're buying and bringing on premises. This is considered to be best practices nowadays. Do not let people tell you no. If they are bringing in a new piece of technology, hardware, software, whatever it is we're doing in here, you need to understand how that works compared to everything else, or you will continue to incur data debt at an increasing rate, and that is never something that is helpful for your organizations. The second one is trying to figure out what are foundational practices that we should have in place. The idea here is keeping, again, all of these, by the way, are part of a larger effort, and that you use AI as this expert companion in order to do this. So I have been with organizations where I have walked into a legally used Gemini. And also, let me just be real clear too. Some of your organizations will not let you use AI at this point. The number of them that do prohibit that is less and less. It's becoming more and more, even in some of the classified areas that I work in the government, we have managed to get our hands on some of these types of technologies here as well. So you can ask it, I'm here at company X. What should I look for at company X in the way of finding data debt? And how do I prepare that data for what's going on in the AI world? And what can I look at from a ethics and an ROI perspective here as well? Again, each of these charts I find incredibly useful and just quite good. So again, feel free to print them off and make whatever use of them you can. Maybe you'll improve on what I'm doing here as far as that goes. The next one here is that you've really got to have some sort of tangible value. Otherwise, your boss has already read the headline, 95% of all AI things don't work, right? That's the way they read that headline. It's not actually what the headline says, but it doesn't matter. It's still the way they're going to read it. So what can we do? Turn whatever pilot project we're doing into something that produces return on investment. And this is critically important. So there's a lot of things that you can help. It's really a transformative process that needs to occur in order to do this. There's no way that you can do all of the kinds of things that you need to do with AI and not do some sort of transform. I mean, again, you're taking something that used to be a person done thing and transforming it into trusting that somebody else does it. I'll give you an example. I have a colleague who does work with a lot of different companies around the world, and his chief legal counsel, every time they tried to do work, would take the NDA that came from whatever they were trying to do work with and make it work with their NDA. And that's a lot of work. They compare them line by line. They're looking for things. There's a lot of memorization and really not fun work even for lawyers to do. Whereas they've now got a system where they can take virtually any NDA that comes in, run it in through a API-based consult on this, and it will pop out the other end of it an NDA that requires maybe 2 minutes of double checking a couple of things that it's not certain about, but it's got everything else very, very correct. The key is to overcome the complexities of the legacy environment. Again, most organizations don't have lots and lots of people that are really good with this, which means you guys are going to be the ones that are going to be out there doing it. Preparing the data for AI. They can do profiling and root cause analysis to make sure that we get the fit for purpose that we're looking for. And finally, it can help you evaluate risk in that particular area. So again, we've gone through 3 of these so far. These are really, really good ways of guiding this. There probably needs to be a full day course that we can develop out of the whole thing here. Maybe I'll talk to Mark about putting one of those together at some point for everybody. Again, if you're doing something to get the data better, it might be a good idea to also fight a little bit of the data debt that's there and just show that you can make it happen. You can reduce the data debt that your organization is currently saddled with. But in addition to that, it's also the best defense that you have, right? In the sense that there's no way that anybody with data debt should be hooking up an AI to debt that is that badly maintained. There's complexity, there's low latency, there are resource constraints, there are all kinds of confusion over who is the official steward of that particular data, and again, who has the decision rights for it, et cetera, et cetera. Again, they don't have a map to do this. Now, the next book that I've got coming out, hopefully this summer, working with John Ladley on a book on data debt in particular, so you can dive deeper into that. But without that book, there's just not a whole lot of guidance how to go about cleaning up, accounting for, and preventing future data debt in order to come up with. Similarly, when you're a steward in an organization, oftentimes you've been hired because somebody says we need to have some data stewards, because that's what data governance is all about. We're going to get some stewards in place. So now you've been hired as a steward, and they say, get stewarding. Where do you start? Right? Well, again, there's lots of things that you can do, but what we should be doing here is 2 things at the same time. 1, trying to prove out the viability of an AI project, and 2, eliminating some data debt at the same time, because it accomplishes exactly the same goal in order to do that. Again, there are a lot of complicating factors that go to work with this. There's lots and lots of tactics that you can employ in order to do this. Again, profiling, root cause analysis are just sort of basics. We'll get a little bit more to them in a little bit as well. But the key is not just fit for purpose, but you're trying to get it, in this case, fit for ingestion, fit for AI ingestion as you get things ready to do this. Even if you don't have the data yet, you can still set up the quality, the gates that you need to have, so that when the data does become available, you're not waiting, and you're able to jump right in and get started with it. Next one here is looking at multifunctional. Now, multifunctional just means a jack of all trades. You can see the many, many arms. I have a couple of friends who I tease because they have lots and lots of arms, and they can handle multiple types of projects and things like that. Well, again, there is never going to be the case where you have one thing and one thing only to work on, unless you're in a really different situation. Most stewards that I see are tackling multiple things. That's because some things you can fix quickly, and some things are going to take longer to fix. So you're not going to wait till they're done before you start it. You also go straight out and implement data governance in here and say, look, we're not going to use this data in this AI until we have assurance that we have addressed whatever the particular risks there are. In addition to that, we also want to maintain data ethics roles around this. We don't want them to have to go back in and figure out that ethics would be something we would add later to the fact. In addition to that, your stewards are going to know how the AI thinks. And it's really important that they have a role in explainable AI and making sure that when it pops out here, they can look at this. I'll just give you an example in particular. This is one that's a fairly famous example, but they did a machine learning on some hospital records. And one of the AIs learned that presenting at the operating room with both pneumonia and asthma was not a bad condition. And the reason it wasn't was because when a emergency room doctor met a person who presented with asthma and pneumonia, they would grab them, throw them on a gurney, and put them directly into intensive care. But no records were kept of that immediate emergency transfer. And consequently, it was seen as if you present at the emergency room with pneumonia and asthma, you have no problem because that's what the AI learned, and they hadn't been able to go through and figure it all. One final piece on this slide is understanding the business. Now, many of you are stewards, and hopefully you've been with your organizations for a long time. Again, Ashley said she's been with Reltio for 10 years. I'm absolutely certain she knows the business really, really well, and that's great. But some of you don't have that luxury. I've got another friend who's a data modeler in New York City that changes careers every 5 years just because they get bored with what's happening in banking. So they move to production, or they move over here to regulatory, or they move over here to state government, right? Again, this has got to be one of the most valuable data modelers in the entire world. And again, they don't really get credit for it because they just go and say, well, I don't know your business, but I'll learn it pretty quick. Well, the AI can help you with the business learning as well here. Again, sometimes it's just a matter of figuring out how things go through the systems, but if you can build some of these tools that will be extraordinarily helpful. What you'll also find, this is a way I made some big difference on some early projects, was just having sources of knowledge. So we were implementing a PeopleSoft project at one point in time, and PeopleSoft, as their want is, had sent us some data models that were wrong, but they had errors with them, so they could at least calculate what the corrections would be and all of that sort of thing. But the point was, we had all of the metadata about PeopleSoft. So people would come in and say, I don't know anything about PeopleSoft, but I've been told to create a training plan for it. Where do I start? Well, because we knew the data, we could use this understanding the business and AI and go through and pull this stuff together very, very quickly for them. And we became a source of truth about the new ERP that was being implemented. I'm certain many of you have your own versions of that you can put in place, and please do. That's one of the things we do these things for, is to make sure that everybody, all new ideas get to come out early. And again, if you aren't headed for San Diego at the end of this month, Mark and I will be both out there to look for additional stories that come out of there. Finally, this last one is to look at effectiveness and efficiencies that are in here. When you start out on these things, if you ask the question of the people who are doing the work, what's the thing that takes the most time and causes you the most discomfort, or still causes the most people to say, take this job and shove it, right? You will be able to find that out through this. Again, HR sometimes needs to get involved, but you can understand what this is. The AIs are smart enough that they can go out and describe in a few words and give you a candidate process model. It's not necessarily the model that your organization should use, but it's a great starting place. Kind of like having a copy of Len Silverstone's Universal Data Modeling book there, so that if you ever need to look up a particular data model type, that book, even though it's out of print now, is still the best source in order to do that. So what we're looking for here is, can we leverage business insight? Somebody comes in and says, hey, I used to look at deals that were coming in, but I think it'll be easier if we go to the people who are creating the deals rather than waiting till the deals are published. Yes, we're further up the food chain. So that's a business insight that you may want to do that. And again, your stewards should be involved in that process. I'll show you why in just a little bit. And then they're also going to be able to tell you not just that process, but what data do we need to make that process not just work, but perhaps work better. And finally, being able to look specifically at foundational touch points such as ethics that are in there, and also just being dexterous, which is another good thing to be as a steward around that. I asked it for a summary of this. I'm not sure this is a really great one, but it's okay. You got some good ones in there. Maybe not that one's the best. Let's spend the remaining time that we have talking about some practical uses of this. We'll start out just understanding the context again is governance, and corporate governance is something that all organizations are faced with in order to do that. And then, of course, we have IT governance that focuses in on some specific IT related things. Therefore, we have data governance. Now, unfortunately, these are definitions that we've been using for data governance. I dislike them all intently. My definition of data governance is managing data with guidance. The question would be, would you want your sole non-depletable, non-degrading, durable strategic asset to be managed without guidance? The answer is probably not. Now, the further I go up the food chain, I change this definition slightly. Managing data decisions with guidance. Here's the problem. People don't know that they don't know. And when they don't know that they don't know, they say things like, well, let's put in Salesforce and make sure that it's in by Friday because I want our salespeople to be able to use it next Monday. Well, it's an IT project, which means it will run longer than it should and take a little bit more time. Something will happen that will cause a delay. I don't know exactly what, but something will happen out there. And when we do that, we lose time. Well, we'll clean the data after we put it in Salesforce. No, that's the whole point of Salesforce is to give people a new place to get higher or at least of known quality data in order to do that. As I said, these managers are typically not aware that they're making data decisions. So we try to connect the data decisions to value in that. There's a three-stage process that basically starts out where people think that data is a byproduct of IT. It's detritus. It's stuff that washes off us in the shower, if you want to think of that as a horrible image in your minds. But we quickly take them out of that and put them into another role, which says, no, actually, they really should be up here at level 2, where they have a different set of capabilities in there. In addition to level 1, now data is seen as a resource. Cool. And where do we go after that? Well, we go to the third level where data is seen as an asset. This helps everybody get to this shared understanding because if you talk to any CEO anywhere in the world, one of the things they will all tell you is that people don't speak the same language. The business people talk differently than the IT people, and those are different from how the system is used, and we've got to get all of these things to talk together. By the way, this little cute animation here that I did, I had it feed this particular piece into it. So this is obviously one diagram I'm putting together. And I said animate it. So it makes it a little bit more attractive. We can keep those short-term executives from getting too distracted with all of that sort of thing here. Key again is to make sure we're all literally on the same sheet of paper. If you again know a little bit about me, you know I'm a musician, so there's an aspect of that that'll pop up here in a second. Let's talk for a moment here, though, about data governance versus AI governance. And the best articulation I've seen of this comes from Claire Kitchen, who's an Aussie who has a wonderful LinkedIn site that she puts these things out. I'd never spoken with her. I did send her a note and said, I love it, and I'm going to be using it and give you full credit for it. I would encourage you to look her up. She's got some very, very nice articulations. But notice the difference here between data governance and AI governance. Data governance is concerned with inputs. AI governance is concerned with outputs. And again, you can read through the rest of this in here, but it is actually quite a good explanation. Thank you, Claire, for that. Because the really important question as a steward is oftentimes the wrong question that you get asked, which is that, okay, you're the steward, you go own all of the manufacturing data. That's the wrong question. You should not be asking the question, how do we govern all this data? You should instead be asking, should we include this data within the scope of our current data governance efforts? That's the difference. Remember, 80% of your data is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And consequently, there's no point in stewarding any aspects of it in there. In fact, your best role as a steward is to get rid of piles and piles of data from being considered to this. Once you've identified it as duplicative, now you want to find out why is it being duplicated and can we get rid of it? And that will actually help you. in the long run. Imagine, again, coming in as a new steward, and that somebody has done some of this work, but they haven't documented any of this. You've got to document it. And once again, the AI gives you a really good reason to do this. If you take something like Notebook LM and start recording data governance decisions in there, you've got a great place to go back and see what has been the progression, what are we trying to do? Because, of course, if you're in a group of new stewards, it's pretty new in many organizations. Some of you are very mature out there on this, but some of you are new. I think, Mark, when we did one of the surveys out in San Diego, the average data governance group size was one person, which is kind of scary to be out there. And what we don't want is you to have to be out there in the wilderness trying to figure out what's going on and kind of, looking around. Where do we go? What do we do? How do we get things done? We want you to be a well-functioning piece. Again, this is another illustration piece on this that came up, I think, very, very nicely with that. I mentioned musicians before. You can't be musicians if you're not singing off the same sheet of paper. And yet, in music land, you do this by practice, practice, practice. In the data world, you don't have quite so much time to practice, but let me show you the artifacts that are really critical to be able to put together. So what I said early on in this was that you need to have a CRUD matrix. You cannot, however, have a CRUD matrix if you don't have a context model, and that context model does not relate to a process architecture and to a data architecture that you have. And only when you have both a context model with a subsequent associated data model and process architecture, you can put your controlled vocabulary in place and put in place the CRUD matrix. Now, if this is the first time you're hearing about a CRUD matrix falls for create, read, update, and delete. And you can see here that process A reads data item number 2. Well, it can't read data item number 2 if it hasn't been created. So process A has to create data item number 2 in order to put this out, get it to work, et cetera, et cetera. You do not need this for the entire organization, but you need it to be covering the scope that your AI initiative is going to cover. Extremely important in order to do that. We always talk about data owners, and I don't really like the term. It really should be that data owners, data always belongs to the organization. Data owner is really shorthand for data requirements owners. And owning the requirement means you know what data is coming into your organization, into your well-defined process, and what your well-defined process does to it, and where it goes when you're done with it. And that's a lot of context for stewards to be able to understand this, which means they are effectively also process owners in order to do that. I also asked it for an infographic on what are the dimensions of data ownership. Again, I'll put that up there, you get the picture, but the idea is data owner is a fiduciary. It provides the why and the what, gives decision rights and approval authority. It standardizes on specific business terminology and semantic consistencies. It understands what the risks and compliance aspects of it are in order to do this. And finally, you're responsible for valuing it or monetizing that particular piece. Really important to understand. Somebody, wow, I'm a data owner, great. Well, good luck. It's a task that is non-trivial. Now, we'll get into stewards. There's a whole bunch of things. My friend David Plotkin wrote a really nice book 10 years ago that talks about all different types of data stewards. And again, it's a good book, but it's not the starting point. If you're just getting started on this, if you get that many data stewards, you're also going to have a data steward auditor and a data steward manager in there. And they're going to have arguments like what's the difference between a business data steward and a technical data steward. Don't worry, these are all really good pieces, but they're later. Most of the time, your stewardship starts out as some aspect of part-time. Again, I'll pick an example here that's very, very much out of the blue. Let's pretend that 10 of you are giving 10% of your time in order to do this. I'll always go back to management and say, look, I don't care if you're giving me 10 people at 10%. I want one person at 100% in order to do that. And by the way, we can also ask the AI to create a maturity map showing that if you start with 10% and hit certain targets, you can justify turning those into full-time headcount in order to do this. Again, give me an argument for full-time instead of part-time. Well, dedicated focus and ownership, improved quality and consistency, enhanced collaboration and communication, increased efficiency, and long-term strategic value around all of these. I mentioned that the stewards want to be dexterous, and that means a lot of different things. But here's one example. This happens oftentimes here. Tom Redmond coined the term hidden data factories out there. Well, I talk about root cause analysis here. It's the idea that you've got a data problem, but that data problem is always filtered through some IT system or business process. And that by the time you take a look at the challenge, it looks a bunch of different ways. And as a steward, you can connect all these with your root cause analysis and say, look, if you want us to get better at fixing this type of problem, which we know that everybody has, you need to have a full-time team with dedicated skill sets so that they can get in and start doing this kind of work. Again, it's not always about data debt. There are modern stewards that help direct revenue generation. Again, what sort of data hunting? When you've got your data teams that are trying to do things, they often don't have the skill sets that you have. So you can go help them. You can enable what they call hyper-personalization that goes in, which is the idea that we know so much about what your task is, it can do something else. Again, another piece on all this, but I was working on something else entirely different. And it came up with an idea and said to me, hey, Peter, this would be a good chapter in this new book that you're working on. It's like, wow, I didn't ask for that, but it actually recognized it and said, wow, there's great. So again, how can we monetize all of these things in order to do this? I hope none of you ever write a charter from scratch, right? Just write me a data governance charter for a small nonprofit that rescues horses, and boom, it's right there. It'll do a RACI model for you. If you're not familiar with what RACI is, it's a responsibility, accountability, consultant, informed piece. And when you feed it in a process, it will come back and say, here, whoops, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. Here is a RACI model. Again, 85% correct. Don't take and cut and paste this stuff. But if you had to start with nothing versus 85%, I'll absolutely take it from there. Here's a very complex query here, and I apologize for the screen flipping so much on this. Again, just one of the groups I was working with had a very complex query. And I said, there's such a thing called query optimization. Can we do something with that might make this query run better? And I said, well, I don't know, you can try it. So we worked it for a little bit and came up with a simpler query. But we also found out in that time by using the company's AI that query ran 1 billion times a day. So even though I may have only saved 1/4 of a second, when you add up 1/4 of a second times 1 billion with a B times and have that running and running and running, this is, of course, the very definition of death by 1,000 cuts on all this. What are data stewards for the organization? Again, I put this stuff up, but here you can put all these things up and it doesn't help, right? What is it that our data steward does? Tangibly within scope, he improves data's value and he improves data's use. These are the complex things that you want to make sure that they do. Again, compare the story types. A technical person says, clean some data. Steward says, I'm going to decrease the number of undeliverable targeted marketing ads, reorganize the database. Great, the Salesforce do their own analysis. Develop a taxonomy, common vocabulary. Optimize a query, right? Reverse engineer the old system. Let's keep what's good and get rid of what's no longer good. And let's get inside steward's brain a little bit. We do have a good set of understanding what the knowledge and skills are for a data steward. I'll just leave those for you there. But we also have to talk about ethics for exactly 1 minute. Again, the key here is lots of good books and references. If you have trouble getting started, just find the movie Coded Bias. Every university in the world bought a copy of it, and it's out there at Netflix. So you can definitely get a copy of that as well. Similarly, the Open Data Institute has put something together called the Data Ethics Canvas, and you can actually ask it questions against this. So here's an ethical question. What would be the possible considerations of posting some email addresses online? And it comes back with a very good response in order to do this. Again, all of these things are really problematic. I have 4 more of these chats. I won't go through each of them. You can read them at your leisure, because I do want to finish off with one final piece here, which allows you to say, again, using all those challenges in there, what are we trying to do? We're complementing the existing things, figure out what the cadence is, provide those tangible returns on investment, use AI to look at effectiveness and efficiency gains out of the whole process, and figure out how we can integrate data debt fighting in there as well. So again, we've gone through a fair amount here. Apologize for rushing a little bit here at the end on this, but I want to get to what should we be doing at this point? And I think the answer to that is pretty obvious. Oops, try that again. There we go. Sorry, I'm going to jump to that one. So that's the next slide. I couldn't get to it. There we go. Again, what do we want to do here? Well, inventory, affiliate, identify. There are other people out there who are doing stewardess activities, even if they're not in your company, that are in exactly the same spot. Collaborate, get together, connect, organize, and promulgate and get those pilots to come up with a better set of things than the first one that we did. We want you to get better than 95% failure rates with all of that. And with that, Mark, we're back over to you, and we can bring Ashley back in and see what sort of questions our wonderful group has for us.
Yeah, well, we have
1
a
minute
few
over. You got
questions.
me.
Yeah, hey, that's fine. We have a few questions in Q&A. We had a couple of debates in chat. And
Super.
I kind of want to go back to some of the debating that happened in chat and see if I can distill a question out of this. Because we were talking in chat about am I even allowed to use AI in my organization? What is the risk of using AI in our organization? You had a couple of slides up on AI governance versus data governance. Um, I think I think it's fair to mention a little bit about what does that risk aversion mean, and how do we support our organization in putting something together that allows us to take advantage of the tools that are coming on the marketplace that are enabling our stewards to clean data. So
And let me be real clear too, Ashley, you guys use AI in your tool, do you not?
Yeah, we absolutely
Yeah.
do.
So if you buy Reltio, you're going to be using AI. So we'll
Well,
get them
it's a nice
started.
touch.
So this was the slide that was referenced. Again, like I said, I think Claire Kitching does just a phenomenal job at these. She's got a whole series of them. The link is right
100%.
there. You can just click on them. We got to get over to do a talk one of these days. Come over for us in order to do that. So I can't see from your, I'm presenting, so I can't see what your responses are, but I'm going to guess probably about half of you have access to some form of AI, maybe even 2/3 nowadays seems to be the way it's going. More and more companies are joining that movement. Now, remember, I work at a university, so of course they want us to be doing this because they want us to be smart with this technology in order to do that. But it is a very big risk. There are a lot of companies that are doing some very, very intellectual property sensitive work that you would not want to ingest into your standard AI and have Microsoft run off with it, right? Or Google or anybody else that goes into it. Actually, how do you deal with it when you encounter this reluctance in an organization to embrace AI?
Yeah, and so as part of our platform, we actually give the folks the choice. So we've got AI built into a couple different places, whether it being increasing the matching or using an actual AI engine. But what we found is that, we do give customers a choice, and if they are choosing to go with AI, we keep everything isolated within your instance of Reltio. So we give you the control of saying, do you want to keep your questions isolated to your data? Do you want your data stewards to allow the agents to go out to the internet and search for additional data? And so just keeping that governance in place and giving them the choice is really how we found best as we're trying to get into this new age of how do you interact with AI? How do you overcome security compliances and just the unknowns?
It is. And the other thing that I think, unfortunately, people are going to discover is that much of the stuff is out there already. I am super pleased at the quality of the responses I get from AI when I'm talking about topics that are relatively modern. Data governance, I would consider relatively modern. Asking about the Titanic would be not quite as modern, right? And so I think we're just fortunate in that people haven't written a bunch of bad things about data governance in there that most people are pulling into the new area. It may change over time. We may have all sorts of other components that get into it. But at least at the moment, even if your company prohibits you from using it, I'm pretty sure most of you are going home and doing it anyway. Did we address that question, Mark?
I believe so. Yeah. The debate on chat was really interesting, and you guys covered a lot of the points, which is nice. I mean, we could get into a discussion on shadow AI too, I suppose, but maybe we
Oh,
shouldn't.
yes.
Um, what I love this presentation overall, and data debt, Peter, is something that we've been struggling with for eons. It's something I harp about whenever I talk to anybody. Let's put in a preventative measure before we actually fix data so we don't create entire jobs of people who do nothing but fix data over and over again because we don't seem to care about the pitfalls of our entry systems. So with that as a bit of a lead in, a preamble, when we're working with something like addresses, like how do we stop creating a whole bunch of rework for stewards?
Addresses in particular?
Yeah, because it's one of those classic areas, right, that we all like to
Sure.
talk about when we deal with data and data
So the
stewardship.
the ideal thing would be to have a plug-in to the U.S. Post Office so that you can go in and validate your addresses. You've probably seen that when you're on a website ordering from something and you put in your address. It says, "I went and double checked your address. This is a better address. Can I use that one instead?" And most of the time it's right. And it's very little AI involved in that. I can tell you that because the post office is very not much focused on AI in their production systems just at the moment. But actually, you've got a whole module that addresses addresses, correct?
Yeah. And that's actually a really common use case for us. We're typing this in, and sometimes the addresses come back as wrong, even though they might be right. And what we've done is we've actually created agents that support data stewards specifically. It's not automating everything, but it's giving the data stewards the ability to look at addresses and additional data at such a quicker pace. And I don't know how much time we have into it. Happy to show some quick examples of how data stewards really are working with AI in our system.
Mark, that'd be fine with me. You want to, okay with that?
Yeah,
Yeah, actually jump in.
go ahead, Ashley.
Everybody's here to learn, right?
I know AI and data stewards are kind of the main thriving here. So quick example of how we talked about not everyone is ready to adopt AI, but what we're looking at right here is a specific AI agent that is working with your data only. I can allow it or not allow it to go to the web to search for additional data. But whenever we're talking about addresses specifically, I'm going to scroll up here. Let's say you're a data steward and your company has said, hey, we're experiencing delays because of inaccurate address information. I need you to go in and find these addresses, do some research, make sure they're corrected, and fix these issues. If you had one or two records, that would be very manageable. But when we're thinking about this in a business scale, say you've got 1 million records, and that equates to 10% of your addresses. Do you expect data stewards to go in and research 10 million addresses? It's probably not going to happen. They're going to throw your computer at you. But what the agent does is able to actually take the information and say, hey, my address line 1 actually says Florida Department of Transportation. But from the website, I found that this is the real address itself. And it's able to present you this information and do the research for you and say, hey, here's what I found. Do you want me to correct this? Do you not want to correct this? And how do you want to move forward? So it's really that conversational piece of here's my problem, help me do this research, make it manageable, and then let's fix it together. Where
And that
we're
goes
not
back to what you were
closing.
describing before, the conversation that you're having with the agent in this case.
Absolutely. I mean, and without understanding the data or having a model that understands plain English, you're not going to be able to ask questions like, find me my top 100 customers with inaccurate addresses. And that's a big thing from what we're seeing with different AI agents is that unless you're able to actually have that conversation with their data, you're going to need a transformation layer. But the cool piece about this is I can simply just say, hey, go fix these for me. But don't make changes. Work with me on it and tell me what you would suggest, giving that control to the data stewards itself.
And again, that's where we see it as well, is that this is going to be something that would become more expert. Now, you saw the way I had done the little gem in there. Do you have that kind of capability where they can add additional components about my specific data steward role?
Yeah, 100%. So
Yeah.
there are settings that we can add in to these different agents where I can say if anyone says tagged or segment, then I want you to filter by, the top 100. So you can make it custom to your role or to your set of, users or customers that you're working with, just like you would any other AI agent itself, but you're only working with your data here.
Exactly. A nice, safe environment so that hopefully your security people won't be jumping up and down and going crazy on it. Great questions, though. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
As a poster security person myself, I appreciate that angle too. Thanks for raising it.
Get Mark
We
aside at a conference. He's got some stories to tell.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, story time happens a lot. So we've got a couple more questions in Q&A that I want to get to here. And this actually came in pretty early, but it's a wonderful question that was asked by one of the attendees here. They start off with, I understand data debt, but how do you train your existing data stewards? I think this is like the million-dollar question, eh, Peter?
Mm. Well, I guess, I would certainly want to find out what it is that the data stewards have been doing. In other words, if there is an existing context. I mean, this is a good thing that both Ashley and I know very, very well. You don't just walk in and tell everybody that they suck, right? It's real important to be able to say, hey, there are some things that we're trying to do here, and we really want to have this to be a successful piece in order to do this. So the question is, usually when I see stewards that have to be retrained, it's that they've decided that stewardship is a desk job and that they can sit at their desk and have things and make decisions about stuff and that sort of thing. I prefer the data steward to be a much more active position. Again, going out, finding out what are the problems people are having. How can we help you? Remember, there is nobody else in the organization who is, in fact, helping you to understand what types of things are going on with respect to your data. It's just not a thing that happens on that. And so we end up with these really, really bad situations of somebody just not knowing what to do. Where do I go next? What are the things I need to do? I want to keep doing what I've been doing. It's like, well, that's nice, but that's not producing results. And that's what we're really trying to do is to show the value in there. Ashley, any tips for somebody how to get a group of data stewards that need to be retrained?
This is such a great question, and it's always so iffy because with the world changing into AI, you're changing how everyone's working. And so it's not changing, exactly how, what you want them to do, because the end goal is the same. Understand the data, make it better, make your customers feel more known. But what we've learned is that going through an iterative approach of getting people introduced to a UI that's friendly and getting small projects as a win where they're comfortable with this area. I understand that it's so much easier. That's for us is how we've really got it, just with iterations and small wins, making sure that just to say the elephant in the room, folks are typically scared that AI is going to take over data stewards. And the reality is that that's so far from being true that we really need them to understand that, AI is meant to make their jobs easier where we can let them thrive in being the data SMEs because that's who they are. And no one knows data better in an organization than data stewards. So making sure that we are taking those steps to make them comfortable with AI is super important to how we operate.
Absolutely. And I'll take another dig at the education system too. Here, we have been telling people in the education world that the way you solve problems is that we give you a problem from the textbook and you go solve it and you either get the right answer or you don't. Actually use the word iteration in there. And I find that is the hardest concept to teach students because they're like, well, I did it. It's right here. It's like, yeah, with your scant understanding of the problem, you've decided that this is how you should solve it, right? It would be much better if you probably have heard the famous listen to me, Einstein quote, where he says, well, if I was given 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes solving the problem and 5 minutes designing the solution for it. The more that you can put into that, the better you're going to be able to take in an approach. It will be much less of a reactive approach and much more of a proactive approach. Again, great question. Thanks.
I was gonna say that is that Einstein or Reed Richards from Marvel Comics.
No, see, I'm not a,
That's
the only Marvel comics I've seen is Deadpool, and that's thanks to you and
there you
Karen.
go.
So I don't know the rest of the Marvel world. Do you do Marvel,
That's
Ashley?
funny. Uh,
A little bit, but not too much.
Yeah, that's sort of
and
me
who'd
too.
have
But
thought the webinar would have gone in that direction, right? We do
all
have
right.
a question here, and I love this question as well. So thank you so much to the asker who put this forward. What can help us avoid creating too many processes and too many checks that drive people away from documenting their data?
Really great question. Ashley, you've never seen an organization overcorrect on that variable, have you?
Never.
Yeah.
Too many processes? No.
The real best way that I find to think about these things is the old 7 ± 2. Mark, I know you know what that's a reference to.
Yeah,
He said,
yeah.
hopefully. Yeah, okay. So they did some psychology research early on and found out that really the human mind in terms of its working memory, and I know that's a term that only us ancient computer types have. Actually, we're obviously much older than you as far as that goes. But it just means how many things can you really think about? It proves that multitasking doesn't really work and all the rest of the things that go around that. Um, and that's why they made phone numbers in the United States to be 3 digits plus 4 digits. If you go to the rest of the world, you'll notice it doesn't work that way because they didn't follow the same kind of research. But it turned out that that 7 was actually not really correct. That's where they came up with the ±2, because most people think of your prefix. That was actually the exchange code in the early days, back when phone numbers were tied to geographic locations. Of course, they're not tied to that anymore. So, but the design rules are still the same thing. And I get students that will come in and they'll look how many boxes I crammed into this particular design. It's like, no, that's not the goal. The goal is communication. We want people to understand what it is we're trying to get to them, not to cram something down their throat. In there. So that would be my guidance, is just to say that as you're doing this, things can only be as complex as they can be documented. And the documentation itself can help you to do this. So whenever I get students that come to my office and they've got 20 boxes on a page, we look at them, say what is going on here, and then we usually say, great, this looks like a subroutine. By the way, they don't have subroutines in Python. So they don't even learn about them anymore these days. But there is a way of going about that. That's my thoughts on it. Ashley, do you have any that would get in there? And then maybe Mark has some ideas too.
So whenever I hear the word, too many processes and too many checks, I go back to how we work with implementations, because a lot of what we do is typically taking folks from mainframes and databases and moving to a modern solution. And what that does is really challenges you to rethink of how you are trying to get from point A to point B. So when it comes to working with their data, we always like to start with the goal. What is the end goal of, what points do you need about your customers? What needs to be documented? And then we rethink of how you get there. Because in reality is the way AI and the world is changing so fast, a lot of times the processes are going to need to change just as quickly. And so as long as we keep that end goal in mind of what do we need to get from this data, we work backwards from there.
Couldn't agree more. Mark, any thoughts?
Uh, well, yeah, I like to say, like, have mercy on people in your organization. They just want to do the right thing. They just want to know what they need to do. And if we put too many processes or procedures in place for them to do the right thing, then they have no hope of doing it. So make it easy to be a data steward, ultimately, is what I like to say.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
somebody in chat had a good point. It was like, I need to make an agent to enable my data stewards. I'm like, yeah, probably. That's
Yeah.
probably a great idea.
Let them know that this is a lot more than just checking boxes and doing controls, right? This is actually gets into process redesign. And I couldn't agree with you more, Ashley, as far as the opportunities for it, because when I see this happening in the real world, they're usually starting with maybe the process piece, but they're not thinking about the data. And only if you do it with an integrated process and data model are you going to be able to really come up with a solution that's going to be something that's going to make a difference in terms of the organization. Again, that ROI that you're looking for, or the the ability to stay in business in some instances in order to come up with it. It's really a tough process, but it is absolutely what needs to be done.
We do have another question. This popped up early in the webinar too, and this is for you, Ashley. This questioner has recently read that Reltio had been acquired by SAP. How do you envision that will impact Reltio and its offering, as well as its complement to SAP for those organizations already using it?
Yeah, so love that. This is actually a very exciting thing for us because it really shows how some of the bigger organizations are realizing that getting data in and out and having a trusted context is where the future is going. Everybody's got AI, but at the end of the day, you need to have trusted data to give that AI. And so for us, it's not going to change our platform, day one or anything like that. The goal is really to have Reltio help be the integration pieces and the background with the SAP Data Cloud. And everything is going to continue with our operating system. We are going to continue to integrate with many different systems. That's not going to change. It's just really going to help accelerate things and open up new doors for SAP and those data cloud offerings.
And how's your German? Just kidding.
Yeah.
That was always the question of the SAP acquisitions in the old days. But you're right. Again, you've probably seen that Salesforce acquired Informatica. I've talked to several people at Informatica. I've talked to several people at Salesforce, and they're kind of not sure what they're doing with it just yet. They've got a plan or a concept of a plan or something about this. I think SAP's got a little bit more focus for you guys on this. It'll be really exciting.
Yeah, we are all very excited for it. Like I said, it's going to be business as usual for us with the wonderful options of integrating with their data cloud.
Did you ever run across a product called Sapphire?
Yeah.
Personally, no.
That was one that SAP should have bought. They were the people that went in and reverse engineered the customized SAP models
Interesting.
that were out there. And it might be an interesting piece in there. Go ahead, Mark.
I think we have time for one more question. And well, I'm cheating a little bit because the way
You're
this
in
person
control.
asked it, what it wants, I'm yearning so hard to go on a rant here, but
Well, go
I'll
ahead.
try
Come
not
on, we
to.
can do it.
So based on the volumes of new data being ingested and new AI technologies, are we moving into an era where data will not have to be structured anymore, since AI will be capable of deciphering answers in a pool of data? Can I compare that
Gosh,
to having a messy desk, but knowing where everything is? Is there a trend towards unstructured data? I'm going to get on my rant for 2 seconds here because
sure,
I've been
sure.
thinking about this for a while. And I think we're going to be moving into a world where we design content to be consumed solely by AI chatbots, kind of like in the late 90s when we were consuming or creating content to be consumed by web crawlers. I want to teach AI specific things. So I'm going to have AI specific accessible content that is just going to be unformatted uh, uh, stuff for the AI to read and not for humans. But so this is something I've been thinking about. Anyway, I'll stop talking. Ashley, Peter, what do you guys think about that as an idea?
Go first, Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I view it as where it's a messy desk but not knowing everything is, because at the end of the day, when you think about data, you still a person or AI still needs to know what is the accurate data for a person. And if you think people move, people get new phones, new email addresses, you're going to need to have that somewhat structured. Now, think about it in an unstructured way. When you get data from documents, data from different PDF files, that is absolutely being pulled into AI now. And what we are seeing is that you take the unstructured data and put it into a structured format that can be easily indexed by AI or other downstream systems. So I don't know if I think that long term we'll have the messy desk, but I do think that everything will become a format that is accessible by an AI agent or an API.
That's so
Again,
clever. Oh yeah, I love this topic. Okay, so I love how you frame that, Ashley, because it makes me think of what is AI actually doing when it's ingesting this unstructured data? Well, it's creating a schema for it. It's dropping
Yep.
it in a vector database. We're
Yep.
creating some flavor of context. It's like this illusion of a messy desk that was never messy to begin with.
Yes.
Sorry. So I got ranty again. Peter, do you want to
No, no
close
problem at
this
all.
thought off?
I will just say that I think both of you are correct, and that the only thing I would disagree with the question is that it is not that we're ingesting more unstructured data. First of all, let's be real clear on the definitions here. If something is
Mhm.
truly unstructured, you could not structure it. That's the definition of something that is unstructured. So what we're really talking about here is taking semi-structured data and making it more structured. And AI works on exactly those structures, whether it's a graph database, vectors, whatever it is that you're looking at. On the underside of it, there is some sort of implied or explicit structure in order to do that. Again, that you'll see some of the early AIs were really trying to do things. Remember, the spirit is willing, the thought is strong and the spirit is weak, or whatever that famous
Yes.
translation was. You remember that? And it came up with the vodka is really strong and the fish stinks. I mean, it was.
Uh,
On that note, we should
that's Yeah, I think that's
wrap
all we
this.
have time for today. Any
Thank you, guys. This
final
has been great,
parting
Ashley.
thoughts before I hit the end webinar button?
Ashley, pleasure to have you on, and hope to see you again in a future one. And we'll look forward to seeing a bunch of you guys out in San Diego next week. Sorry, 3 weeks from now. Next week.
Really
Listen to me.
appreciate the time today, guys. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.